Sounds like you got to hear my voice for 8 seconds. I don't know what to do with that. I feel like I do the same thing every morning, and that I know what I'm supposed to do. And sometimes, most of the time, it works. And when it doesn't, I have no idea why not. But so I'm going to do what I taught yesterday. I thought it was important for us to look at and to remember. But Luke chapter 16, I've referred to a number of times as pastor when I'm preaching to our people, but I want to share with it with all the audience today on Daily Focus. Luke chapter 16 in verse number 9 says, "And I say unto you, make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when ye fail, they may receive you into everlasting habitations." And so Luke 16 is written on the platform of a parable that Jesus is teaching. And he is teaching regarding stewardship, and that somebody who was entrusted with a stewardship, he was given things by his master to manage. And the story tells us that he's going to be brought in to give an account. And the steward becomes very, very fearful. He comes to the point where he realizes, I'm in trouble. I have used what my master gave me for myself. I have not done what he wanted me to do. I haven't thought about his interest. I've only thought about mine. I am in trouble. And so the parable is a little bit confusing at points when the master says that he almost compliments the steward when he steals further from his master in order to take care of him. And he says he's been wiser in this generation than Christians have been as it relates to eternity. And it just simply means he's put more effort into meeting an immediate need or to supplying what he was trying to solve right now than what Christians are about looking to the future and making decisions and putting energy into what is going to be a reality in the future. And so that's the context. And so when we come to verse number 9, he says, make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness. Whenever we see the word unrighteous, we sometimes think, well, that must be bad. But that's not the context. The context is just simply referring to things that do not have a spiritual value. They simply are used for here in this life. There are things that God gives us here in this life that we're not going to have to manage. We're not going to have to deal with when we get to heaven. For instance, we're to manage the time God has given us for his glory. We're not to use it for ourselves. It's tempting. And our natural bent is to do it. In heaven, there's no time. And yet it's a stewardship given to us here. It's an unrighteous mammon. Money, we're not going to deal with money in heaven, and we're thankful for that. But here it's necessary, and it's an unrighteous mammon, and we're to use it the way God wants us to use it, and not use it for just however we want. Opportunities, talents, we could go across the board. You understand, God has given us things to function in this life, but ultimately we function in this life thinking about eternity. So God says we need to work to accumulate some unrighteous mammon. We're to make the best of the unrighteous mammon. Whether it's time, whether it's money, whether it's talents, whether it's opportunities, we should be using these things in a specific way. One of those unrighteous mammons is freedom in a U.S. Constitution with the right to vote. But we're not going to have any of that in heaven. That is something that has been entrusted to us here on earth. And we're either a wise steward, using it the way God wants us to, or we're not. I preached Wednesday night and talked about Ben Franklin said regarding our form of government when he came out and people said, so what kind of form of government did you decide on? He said, a republic if you can keep it. And the idea there is that A republic form of government is a government by the people for the people. In other words, people have to be informed, people have to be involved. And unfortunately, down through the years, Christians, not just American citizens, but Christians have decided it's not important to be involved or informed, and they get frustrated, or they get lazy, or both, and then they are not involved, or they buy the lie, you really shouldn't be involved, you really should be about this, that, and the other thing, but that's for the world. It's not true. It's unrighteous mammon, and we're going to give an account for it before God as a faithful steward or an unfaithful steward. And so God is saying, make friends of the mammon of unrighteousness. In other words, get what you can, but here's the deal. So that when you fail, that's a phrase for when you die, and this life is over, and you don't need any of that unrighteous mammon anymore. Who's they? Those who you use the unrighteous mammon entrusted to you here on this earth, so that they may receive you into everlasting habitations. In other words, God gives a picture here that if you will be faithful and you will use that which I've entrusted to you the way I wanted it to be used, then there will be fruit in heaven we call souls. People who have been touched by the gospel, people who have been told the gospel by you, people who have received the gospel. God's going to have them line up. And when we get to heaven, we're going to get to see real time the impact of how we used what God gave us, whether we were faithful or not. Well, he goes on to talk about, if you're faithful in a little, you'll probably be faithful. I've taught that for years. People say, I would tithe if I just had more money. I say, no, you won't. You'll buy more toys. You'll have nicer toys. You'll have a bigger house. You'll take nicer vacations. But if you're not going to give, you're not going to give. Having more money, and that's a Bible principle. And God says, if you're faithful over a little, you'll be faithful over much. But if you're not going to be faithful with the little things, you're certainly not going to be faithful with more. Why would God trust you with more? And then the familiar verse in verse 13, no man can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. So you can't serve that which God has entrusted to you and make that your God. You got to serve the God who entrusted it to you and use it as a wise steward for his glory. When we are looking at the unrighteous mammon of freedom, the unrighteous mammon of the vote that we are able to cast, we're going to answer to God for it. And God says, you know what? You're either faithful or you're not. But we should be voting in a way that allows us to enhance the gospel, to spread the gospel, to impact souls, so that when we die and we enter heaven, we can see that there were souls there because of our wise stewardship. And so that's my admonition. We cannot serve two masters. May we be encouraged by the reality that God will help us. He will give us wisdom to use that which he's given to us wisely. May God bless you. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.